Hey guys, it's John and Anam. We are back for another episode. Today we are talking about specific topic, basically being still. We hear that a lot in terms of like, hey, be still and all this other stuff. But I think we're going to get a little deeper into what that actually means and kind of going into the story in Mark 4 as well.
Yeah. But before we jump into that, I just want to ask, is there a song that you've been vibing with recently that has like a song?
I think for me, it's been like, just name the song.
Yeah, but you could also go into why.
I think for me, it's the All My Life song by Hillsong. I think it's Young and Free. Because I feel like there's a certain part where it's talking about even basically being in the depths of things and feeling like there's darkness or whatever, but still praising God in the low moments. That's why I really like that song.
That's dope. I actually love that song too. My favorite song, right? Yeah, it was my favorite song for a very long time. Then it started to convict me. It was my favorite song during certain seasons, and then in other seasons when I was disobeying or disobedient, it became a conviction song. And anytime it would come up, I'll be like, skip this song. And I'm so serious, I'm being honest. I Surrender. It is by Hillsong as well. Obviously, it's a hymn and many other things, but like the Hillsong version is what I was listening to the most. And anytime that song came on, when I was already like rocking with God, it was like, like I give you my all. Like I didn't feel pushback. But today I played it and I remembered all the history of, you remember when that song wasn't something that you actually enjoyed hearing because it meant dying to self, it meant giving everything up to God. And I was just like, wow, that's crazy. But like more recently I've gotten into the practice of like, even in my discouragement, which I'm not gonna lie, being sick and out of commission, and then also going through like finals and all this stuff, it will leave you distraught. So
you were out for 10 days.
Yeah,
you're still recovering. You're not even at full.
No, my voice doesn't. I mean, this sounds like an early morning podcast vibe. I don't think I could cut that, but I feel like I'm thankful he got me back up to this, and I have to preach tomorrow, and I'm like, oh man, like, can you just give me the full strength back of my voice? But even if not, I'm good. And I think that's what that song did to me today. It was like, remember that you are in the habit of, even in your discouragement, even when things aren't looking up, you will like hand everything over to him. And it was funny because where's that book? Oh, okay, got you. God put it on my mind. That book that you put me onto, it says on the back, like I went down to the river today and I was just meditating. I wasn't really saying much. And halfway through, I turned the book around and it's just sitting on a log next to me with the Bible. And I'm like, oh, I never actually read the back of it. And it caught me in the midst of me thinking of self-efficiency when God was trying to break me out of that. And it says, your job is obedience. God's job is everything else. And I was like, dang. It's a good reminder. That along with I Surrender, it's like, it's not even on you. Just let it go. Stop doing the performance thing. Show up how God asked you to. Just be obedient and allow whatever it is that he called you to play out by itself. So,
and I mean, it relates to what we're going to talk about today. Which is being still. So I guess my question to you is, when you hear people say be still, what does that mean to you?
I think we've spoken about it a couple of times, but to be completely honest, I think the number one thing that I want for even this podcast and ministry in general, like anything that we do, is to repeat the same message over and over and over. And like, if we ever fall out of alignment, like literally just call us out on it. But the only message is to be able to preach Christ crucified. And that's it. And in regards to your question, it connects with what I just mentioned, Christ crucified. He set the example. When I hear be still, I hear follow after him. I hear keep his precepts. I hear be obedient. I hear stop what you're doing. You're not that important in comparison with God, with Jesus Christ, with the Holy Spirit. You are important, but only through him.
Yeah.
And so when I hear be still, it means be at peace. He's got it under control. Stop doing the theatrics. Stop being a busybody. Don't be a workaholic. Don't try to figure it out on your own. Just wait for instructions, wait for orders. And the best way for me to do that is just to calm everything I'm doing, go to a place where, and I've mentioned this, like I can't be distracted, and start listening. And that's it. So that's more or less what I feel when I hear be still, but I don't hear it frequently from other people, I will be honest.
I feel like I hear be still a lot. It's what's that word that's like, it's like a phrase that's being used a lot. I forgot there's a word for it, but I feel like people kind of throw it around, but I don't think we really understand what, like we kind of take it into factor sometimes. And I'm not saying all the time. I just feel like I just hear it a lot. And for me, be still, I think of two things. I think of Elijah when he was running away, and then he was trying to hear God's voice, and it wasn't in all of the big, natural things that were going on. It was like in like the whisper of like the wind type of thing. I also think of like stop trying to prove your worth. Like just seriously stop. Like and I really like this story too because I feel like it gets preached often. Mark 4, the one with like Jesus on the sea in the boat. And one thing that I started realizing is like, I guess we'll just get into it, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess one thing I was talking to you about it in the morning, and I was like, I feel like a lot of people preach the whole like be still, but the thing that's been catching my eye is what Jesus said to them afterwards. Why are you afraid? To me, that's like the pinnacle of the story. Why are you afraid? Because that is, I think, the story of every human's life. Why are we afraid? And then the second question that Jesus asks is, why do you lack faith? And I started thinking about it, and I'm like, I feel like a lot of the reason why we do what we do when we forget God, and I'm not saying actively forget God, sometimes we feel like we believe in God so much, but we gotta do.
We lose him in the hurry. And
it's like, what are we scared of? Like, what if we stop? Not stop believing in him, but stop doing so much for him, as in like stop doing so much that we think it's for him, but really, is it for him, or are we doing it because we want to feel worthy, or we
esteemed?
Like something, not just esteemed. Like it could be like maybe someone wants to feel esteemed, or someone else wants to prove their worth, and someone else wants to just like feel like they're important enough and significant enough in this ministry or whatever. But that's what I've been kind of contemplating the whole day.
There's two things. First thing is, it's so funny. She brought up Elijah, and you're often referring to me as that because I'll like stress myself out trying to do something, and she'll know that like God got me in a pause when she sees me like supposed to be doing something. Like I'm supposed to be over here like finishing this assignment, so on and so forth. And she saw me like 5 minutes ago, super stressed. And then all of a sudden I'm napping. Or eating, yes.
It's like food or naps.
Yes. And hey, I'm not mad at it. I'm just saying that most times I feel like God allows for us to take those moments just to cherish what we have.
Yeah.
And we don't even want it sometimes. So we're like, nah, hook me up with some more like, energy drink. Like I need to power through this. I need to, and honestly, I exploit myself every single time I do that. I did that yesterday, and I was like borderline coping with YouTube because I kept on saying to myself, no, I need to read this. I need to do this. I need to do it in such a manner. I need to be able to be like perfect in this respect. And full on New York, or Hispanic, I'm not entirely sure. But basically I was both. Okay, calm down. Anyways, I found myself pushing.
Yeah.
And like I should have read the sign, or notice the warning. When I went back downstairs to study and I'm reading through a book and it's amazing, but God's like, yo, bro, tap out. Like, you can't right now. Like, just take the time to just chill and then come back to it. I should have noticed this because I tried to read it, and then halfway, so I read 2 portions of it or more, and then I basically got to the next portion, and it was like, okay, I'm exhausted from reading. I'm just gonna have my iPad read it for a second, and I allowed it to read it, and I fell asleep, and it was a good 20, maybe 30 minutes. I really couldn't even tell. I just knew I was like broken, busted. I was tired.
Yeah.
And when I woke up, I heard like, see this, you should have just listened to me in the first place and gone upstairs to nap, but you didn't. And now here we are where you still feel like you need to press through. And so I didn't even fully acknowledge God's voice in that moment. And then now I'm suffering with a half-baked sleep thing.
Yeah.
And as soon as I woke up, because I never acknowledged his voice in the first place, telling me, yo, go to sleep. Now I'm like, back to the old thing. Let me just crank out more work. And I started to notice that like my mind started to slip. And then throughout the rest of the night, as much as I tried to recoup from what had just happened, I couldn't. I was in a negative mindset. I couldn't even handle. You kept on asking me what was wrong. And I'm like, I'm just burnt out. And that's what happens when you push yourself beyond what God has asked you to do.
Yeah. So to bring it back to the story in terms of Mark 4, I guess we all know the story, but basically it's they get on a boat after Jesus is preaching the whole day or something. And then they get on a boat, and it's known that this place has a lot of storms because of it, where it is. There's a lot of mountains around, things like that. And they get on a boat with Jesus, and then as they're going, there's a huge storm to the point where they're like fearing for their life.
Yeah.
And they basically kind of rebuke Jesus by saying like, why are you still sleeping? Like, do you not care? Type of thing. It is technically a soft rebuke type of thing. Like, first it's like, do you care? And second, can you do something about it? And then basically Jesus wakes up, tells the waves like,
be still.
Be still. I think in the commentary, it basically said that there's 2 ways Jesus was talking to it potentially. One, as though it's an animal or human, so like actually talking to the waves and the wind, like, hey, calm down, type of thing. And then the other was like to put a muzzle on, as though like, to
shut it up.
Yeah. And then he looks at the disciples and asks those 2 questions. Why are you afraid? Why do you lack faith? And then the disciples end it with like, wow, who is this person?
Yeah.
That was my rendition
of
Mark 4. But what do you think about it? Like, what are your thoughts?
I want to hear your thoughts.
All right. My thoughts are, it's a couple thoughts. First, obviously the disciples are following God. Yeah. They chose God. Right? They have seen miracles. They have accepted, they're still trying to figure out who Jesus is. But to their best understanding, they've accepted that this is the Messiah. Right? So they left their families too. They left their previous jobs, whatever, their livelihoods type of thing, to follow God, to follow Jesus. And then they just see him do all these miracles to then get into this storm, and Jesus is sleeping. If Jesus is sleeping and cannot wake up from these storms, as they're seeing all the miracles, my perception is like, from a third person perspective, I wouldn't be as stressed. I'd be questioning like, okay, like, wake up a little bit. But they're like accusing him, basically. Do you not care? And it makes me think like, because I was listening to the Timothy Keller sermon today, and it makes me think like, sometimes Christians, like when we follow God, we think life is going to get easier, and it doesn't. It actually, to me, gets harder. It
definitely does.
Because now you're openly declaring that you're on God's side.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking like, well, Jesus was still on the boat. He didn't leave. But yeah.
So I find it pretty cool that you mentioned a couple of points. I'm going to try to touch base on some of them. So we're mesmerized sometimes reading this story as a third party, right? Just looking in, because we're like, yo, if he's sleeping, let him sleep, right? But then we get all caught up when God is silent in the middle of our situation. And I'm like, that's me all the time, 100%. I'm like, flustered, maybe even. And how quickly do we even sometimes turn to other idols? Doing. We try to force God's hand. We try to like, so back to the Elijah story a little bit. The prophets of Baal, they were doing the most to try to get their God, quote unquote, to react, to set the altar ablaze. They were doing it all throughout the day. They were even defiling their bodies in certain ways to be able to like prompt God. And I'm like, man, a mixture of what you mentioned in a previous episode of like, sometimes we'll do ministry with that same mentality, like the prophets of Baal, like, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this. It's like, did God actually say all that? Or like, you know, because I get ahead of myself. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, this, and I didn't even vet it. Yeah. I didn't pray about it. But then the other thing is we'll try to cope using other gods instead of just sitting down and being silent for a second. And we've also spoken about this, but like it's hard to be silent in the midst of something that hurts. Giving ourselves 2 minutes to hear God's voice, even in a good day, is hard. Now imagine a bad situation. Yeah. So like I totally understand why they're freaking out. I would have been like in the same boat with them, honestly. Yeah. But it's beautiful that God, and thank you for the exegetical work with the whole, I'm sorry. I appreciate you looking into the commentary. That was dope. Didn't remember that that's how he treated it. I remember him saying, peace, be still. Yeah. And it was like a double command. And I guess that's why there's 2 different renditions of how it was expressed. But every time I read that story, I just see him getting up from like a really good nap. And he's just like, yeah, I don't even get it. All right. And like cracks his knuckles. And he's just like, all right, chill out. And everything just settles. Yeah. And what's interesting is there's a little bit of a connection. This might be a stretch. But Elijah was able to get back to work after he slept, after God fed him, after he spent time with the Father.
2 naps.
Yes. I thought you said tuna, and I was so lost. I'm like, man, this is deeper than I thought. But then Jesus, spending time with the Father, he's resting. Yeah. Rightfully so. Let's acknowledge bodily needs and such, right? Because God forbid, sometimes we try to, how many times in undergrad, I would drink like 6 5-hour energies thinking, I'm going to write this essay. I was doing everything but writing that essay, I promise. Yeah. And those things are terrible for you. Do not drink that. It's cool because there's that connection. It's like they both slept. They both just paused and then they moved. Yeah. They did astounding things immediately after plugging back in with God. Yeah. So when you're drained, do not think that anything but God will be able to provide the energy to be able to move forward and push past the boundary that you've noticed in your life.
Yeah. And it takes me to the whole, like, why are you afraid? Why do you think people are afraid? When they're in this journey, Jesus was like, let's take the boat. So, like, God told you to go on a journey. And you're in this journey and it gets crazy. It gets like to the point where you may be fearing for your life. You may be fearing for your safety, security, stability, whatever it may be. Why do we get scared? Like, what are some of the reasons?
So for me personally, I'm preaching on this a little bit tomorrow. But like when I was leaving New York, he called me out and he was like, I need you to come to me. Your life, like, it ain't gonna go nowhere out here. Like, I don't know how to explain that. It's just, I had this idea of like, oh, be a software engineer or developer or whatever. And he was like, that's so limiting for you, at least. Like, why not do something more? Yeah. And I'm like, I mean, I'm already hurting. I already got my own situations going on. What do I have to lose? Yeah. But the fear element behind it was, what do you mean? I don't know anything but New York. I lived in Panama for like 2 years or whatever, or a year and a half. But even within New York, sometimes it's funny. You get stuck in your little zone and you're like, you go past that zone and you're like, what is this? Is this a new, like it's, so I had a bubble mentality. And so leaving that for me was honestly daunting. And then on top of that, you've spoken about this and I would love to hear your rendition on what fear is for you in respect to being called out by God. But like for me, I saw my parents' health deteriorating, specifically my dad in this instance, but then also my mom was retired. And I had just seen this woman work so hard for so many years, and now I'm going to just bounce, not like stick around. And
Yeah.
for me, it was like, you're not even a good son. Like, why don't you go take care of your parents?
Yeah.
And so the fear that I had was like, what if they die? Because they're already older. They have certain health conditions. My mom's always like wrapping her knee up. And so she was struggling with that, whereas my dad was struggling with like other things like diabetes and such. But it was scary because I'm like, I'm gonna leave now. It doesn't make sense. To what? There's no proof. Like, prove to me that there's something on the other side. And he's like, unfortunately, I can't until you actually get there.
Yeah.
Or at least in the midst of the journey, I'll be showing you.
Yeah.
But that's what scared me in the midst of him calling me to, quote unquote, the other side.
So did you feel like while you were going through that process of getting to the other side, did you have a moment where you were like, where are you? Like, do you not care?
Ooh, a million, bro.
Yeah.
You know this, but thank you for asking. There were moments where we were like in a budget truck headed to like the bosque, which is the wilderness, quote unquote. Michigan is different than New York. And so I've heard that reference. It was definitely more of a shock for me, even while living in Panama. Like this, is different from New York. But when we moved out here, we immediately got a not great house in a not great neighborhood. Heard gunshots all the time. Constantly had like 30, 40 people outside of our crib just chilling at night. It wasn't really ideal. Like I felt like where I was at in New York was already
safer.
Somehow, bro. Like, but I think maybe because you live there long enough and you think,
kind of know the thing. Like, I feel like we're like in Midwest, so it's a little different.
Yeah, I didn't know what people were about.
Cause I just remember there was a time where we literally were in our living room and we had to like duck.
Yeah,
because we heard they were so close, and I was just like, I can't believe this is our life.
Yeah, that was wild, and that lasted a couple of months. But like at some point, I just started waking up. This is not a good thing, but like. I started waking up at like 5, 6 a.m. to talk to God. But before my alarm clock would sound off, I would hear gunshots first. And I was like, all right, Lord. And it's funny because I was just like laying on the bed like, you know what? Let me just hold this position for a while until like I'm good. Because our neighbor had expressed that bullets had entered his house at some point, and he had a little daughter in there. And that really freaked me out. So I was just like, you know what? Just out of caution, I'm going to stay down. But then I would get up and it became the norm. And God really sheltered us through all of that. But there were moments like that where I was like, yo, where are you? Like, you told me you were going to like, you wanted me to come out here to study about you, to get closer to you, not necessarily to like go out there and create a ministry per se. But you told me to come out here and I wanted to learn about you. Now you got us in this like little house that feels so, but even within that he showed me the blessings. But there were a lot of moments like that caused me to think, yo, are you still with us? Because I'm not sure.
No, I feel like those, I think it was like 6, 8 months that we were there. I think it definitely was just like, wow, I can't believe this is like, we knew we were following God, but it was just like, wow. And now I look back at it. And it's funny because like I feel like we reminisce about those times, and we sometimes go back to the house and like look around the neighborhood and things like that, like little creeps. But no, just like nostalgia and things like that. One thing that I was hearing in Timothy Keller podcast was oftentimes in our lowest moments are the moments where we are willing to go to God, which is unfortunate. But also where we see his grace even more. His grace is always there. But we see his grace even more when we're in our lowest. Because that's where we're communing with him the most. Unfortunately, that is human nature. We have to get better at that, where we commune with him even in our highs. But it just made me think like that's what produces perseverance and endurance and the whole character thing, like that verse. That just like perseverance, endurance, character thing, because I look back at that and I'm like, that actually produced resilience. That made me look at God of like, he had to get us out for us to not be like, wow, glamorous life, but oh, this is pretty hard, and it's going to be hard for a very long time. I feel like as Christians, we think that, like I said, when we get into Christianity, when we start connecting with God even more, we're like, oh, we're safe now. No, Satan hits you harder because you chose a side. And you keep choosing him. You keep choosing God. And so things get harder. And it feels like, God, where are you? Do you not care? And I think sometimes people say like, oh, you can't question God like that. God allows us to question him. You look at Psalms 88. I was listening to that Heman wrote the psalm, and basically it ends not even in hope. It ends, the last sentence is like, and my only friend is darkness. And then that's it. And it's like, he basically says to God, like you, like, I've been stuck for, like, where are you? I've been stuck for a long time, since my youth. And that's just the human perspective of what's going on in the grander scheme of things, in my opinion. And I look back into those moments when we were at the house, and I remember feeling like, wow, this is actually pretty crazy. And I would like tell God, like, you need to get us out of here, or like, really, like, you know what I mean?
This is interesting though. I do get what you mean. And just to clarify, like, you're right. It is some of the hardest stuff. Some of the hardest things that happen are when you are choosing a side. When you choose God, it does become more difficult. However, it gives him more capacity to work on your behalf.
Yeah.
Because we have autonomy. But often we're stuck in this limbo where Satan's able to do whatever he wants because he's lawless.
Yeah.
And then God doesn't want to intervene or, let's say, overstep on that autonomy. And so once we choose him, it's like, okay, like, it's like a lawyer fighting on your behalf. You have the lawyer as long as you want the lawyer.
Yeah.
But as soon as you don't, he still... The thing about God is he still keeps you alive.
Yeah.
He still protects you. He still creates opportunities for you in hopes, in desire for you to come back. But there's just that. So even though we have an enemy after us, we have a bigger God.
Yeah.
We have someone who will always protect us.
The other thing that I like about this story is how human the disciples are. Because you're saying God's grace is sufficient, right? That's basically what you're saying. The disciples lacked faith. They were scared. But Jesus still came to rescue them, right? But then looked at them and was like, basically telling them, like, you need to fix this situation, like your heart issue. It's in the blue book that I think you read today, but it was about external and internal wars, or I guess things going on. So externally in this story, disciples are going through a storm where they are in danger. But then internally, how does that impact them? So when I look at, or when I read where Jesus is saying, like, why are you so scared, or why are you scared? It's because it finally hit them, not finally, but it hit them internally. They're scared because there's unbelief about God and who he says he is. And that's where Jesus is working on their faith. Yeah. Because they think he's the Messiah, but they still have an idea of the Messiah. Yeah. They don't know he's going to get crucified. You know, they're thinking he's the king, he's going to be, you know, saving Israel or whatever. But yes, he does do that, but not in the way that, you know, they expect it. And that's where Timothy Keller was talking about false expectations. A lot of times when we are going through our suffering time or suffering period, half the pain is because of our false expectations of, I'm Christian now, or I mean, I was praying so much, or I believe God, like, where is he? Well, you have false expectations. Like, the whole Bible is about all these people going through pain. They're not amazing, wonderful stories. I think about Abraham going through pain of leaving his father's land. I think about Cain and Abel dying. I think about Joseph and how he got betrayed by his family and had to be like basically a slave. Israel's whole story, and like, you know, and David messing up, and Solomon, like
It's pain.
it's pain. They all followed God, but they lived very painful lives because something bad was done to them, or they themselves were struggling with sin, and then living out the consequences of that. Why would we expect anything different?
Yeah. And even like Hebrews 11, some of the characters you mentioned are there. And it's like the Hall of Fame of people who have faith, right? Expresses that even with the people who had faith and did everything that they could within what God had given them, they did not receive the promise.
Yeah.
And so like that means as good as you quote unquote are in this life, as good as you perceive yourself to be, the expectations can really create a void within you.
Yeah.
And that void will basically allow for something to come in when you expect, oh, okay, well, you know, I did this, so naturally I should have this.
Yeah.
And that is actually part of the idea of self-efficiency and being a busybody and doing. You do, hoping that the expectation will come true. What happens when it doesn't?
You're reminding me of a quote that I heard too. I'm going to butcher this completely, but basically the person is saying like life is pain, and if you hear otherwise, it's because someone is selling you something.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I'm like, dude, I feel like the world sells us so many iterations of what reality should look like. We should be youthful or look youthful all the time.
Sheesh.
We should be happy all the time. We should have so much money. We should be wealthy. We should be all of these, just enjoying life. But that's not the reality. The reality is, and I feel like I sound dark right now, but life is pain. And the Bible is filled with painful stories. And there's joyous moments for sure. And that's where we have to rejoice. But we also have to learn how to rejoice in those painful moments where God didn't leave us. Jesus did not leave the boat. He was still there.
Imagine he was just like, bye, no faith.
Like I think about like when I was hearing the podcast with Keller, it was like the only time God turned his face against a human, the only time there was actual darkness, where Psalm 88 says like darkness, my only friend is darkness. The only time a human has felt darkness is when Jesus was crucified and dying on the cross. That's the only time. Other times, subjectively, we feel darkness.
Yeah, but the purest form of it.
Yeah, we feel loneliness. But objectively, God did not leave us.
Yeah.
God is still here. God's grace is still here. We just don't feel it because it's not turning out like it should be. If I think about living where we used to live, I had no idea we would be where we are right now.
No, not at all.
God completely blew me out. I'm in awe and shock of where he's gotten, because I could not have done that by myself. And I think that's where we have to keep remembering these miracles and where he's got us out from, when we are in those moments where we feel like, you're not here. You don't care. Because that's unbelief, but that's targeting God's character. And I struggle with that. I struggle with not feeling like God is sometimes as loving as he says he is. And that's something that I'm working on. But I have to start really understanding, even when life is sucking, he is still loving. And he loves me and he cares for me and he's going to get me out. Not me. I can't do anything to get myself out of these situations and these moments of lament.
That should be on a hoodie, by the way. Even when life is sucking, God is still loving.
Okay.
Nah, but like, honestly, I thought about something that was kind of relevant. Elijah, right? He was talking to God. From what I remember, he was expressing that it was okay. Like, he was actually asking God to withhold rain, right? Because Israel had been so far gone in their idolatry, worshiping Baal. What's her face? Jezebel. Had them all caught up on some nonsense. And let's focus in on that. I feel like this isn't necessarily a fact. It's just when you get caught up on idolatry, it expresses that there were idols everywhere.
Yeah.
In the walls, on the shelves, so on and so forth. They were head over heels worshiping other gods.
Yeah.
They were, honestly, this is kind of what Hosea expresses, and in general, but it was obviously about Israel.
Yeah.
But we fall into that too. We exploit ourselves and sell ourselves to be used by other idols, and those idols give us temporary satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why we get so frustrated at God is because we want him to act like those idols. We really want him to produce the same dopamine hit that those idols give us. And then we're mad at him because he's not doing what we asked him to do.
Yeah.
Because why would he? What, like, the thing is, if it was your child, right? And your child was begging you to do something that you knew wasn't good for them.
Yeah.
Would you give in to that? Probably not. Hopefully not. But as soon as the parent says, no, I'm sorry, I cannot do that for you.
Yeah.
You immediately, like, the child becomes hostile or frustrated, and you become the enemy. But there's a bigger plan.
Yeah.
It seemed like you wanted to say something on that, though. Go ahead.
So, it reminds me of the story of Job.
Yeah.
So when Satan went to God, he basically was saying, Job only follows you because you keep giving him what he wants. You keep blessing him. Let's see how he is when you don't bless him anymore.
Yeah.
Let's see how much he still serves you and worships you, right? Because Satan is basically accusing Job of having a transactional relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so God allows it to happen. It's like, okay, you could go see his heart. And all of these things get ripped away from Job. And he's going through physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, financial pain, whatever it is, right? And relational pain. But he still manages to worship God, even in the pain. And he has moments where it's like, where are you, God? All of this stuff. And God has to talk to him and say, hey, were you there? But still, at the end of it, basically God had to rebuke his friends, saying he's still a man of God. So you guys need to, like, apologize.
Yeah.
Even after Job has that conversation with God. And it's like, oftentimes we want God to serve us. God, I want this. God, I want that. Where are you? Why aren't you doing this for me? It becomes a transactional relationship where we have to really ask ourselves, why are we worshiping God?
Yeah.
And can we worship him when we can't rely on our jobs, when we can't rely on our friends, when we can't rely on our degrees, our expectations? Can we still worship God? Because at that point, then that's not a transactional relationship anymore. That's not a relationship where, oh, what can you do for me, God, if I do this for you?
Yeah.
It's even when it feels like you're not here, or it feels like you don't care, I'm still choosing with my own free will to worship you because I know you are love.
Yeah.
I still believe these things about your character.
Yeah.
And that's what, like, I think faith is, and that whole being still aspect is when you're going through a war internally, externally, whatever, and life is difficult, can you still worship God? And it doesn't mean suppress your emotions. It means lament to God.
Yeah.
You could be angry at God, but God, not to idols, like you're saying, not putting like, okay, God, obviously you don't work, so I'm going to go put my all in this person or in that job or in my schooling or whatever. It's like, no, I'm still going to God.
And that's covenant, real talk. Like that, I was reading a little bit about it. When Christ is in the center, regardless of lament or joyous praise, you're still in covenant. Once you break out of that and you start looking to other things to fill those voids, that's idolatry. That's infidelity, actually. And he's calling us to something deeper. But the only way that we could be there is by fasting away from those idols. Yo, when Elijah pulled up, he wasn't doing the most to try to prove to the people like, hey, no, this is the God that does stuff. He was like, I'll wait. You do everything you need to. You cut yourself. You build altars. You dance. You sing. You create smoke. So on. I'll be here. And literally the instance that they were done, he's just like, as a matter of fact, I'll show you how serious my God is. I'm gonna pour water on this altar. A lot. And he still incinerated the whole thing. What was Elijah doing? He wasn't doing all the theatrics. He was just still. He knew his father. Why did he know him though? He didn't have all these distractions, all these idols. The only way that you actually can focus in on God is by getting those idols out of your house, out of your home, out of your space, out of your life. Until then, it becomes very hard because God is pulling you one way with a little subtle voice, and everything else is screaming at you. Propaganda, like not just that, but like movies, different things, different elements will cause you to stumble. Because they know how to attract the human mind. They know how to lure people in. And that's, like every time I notice that I have an idol on the horizon, I'm like, oh, I guess I'm going to have to fast now. And I literally mean away from that thing. I stay away from it for at least a week or two. Just to give me some clear, like, thoughts of how I feel about it. Is it dictating my life? How do I really feel about how I'm moving in my life in correspondence with how that thing is, like, in my zone?
So I guess to go back to your story then, John, like, how did it end with your dad?
So, God brought me out to Michigan. He gave us a home. He pulled us out of that neighborhood that we were at right when we were making friends with everybody, which was funny. But like, he sustained my dad's health. He actually brought him to a better health that he hasn't experienced in quite some time. And that gave me the assurance that like everything will always be okay. As a matter of fact, a couple of months after that, he and my mom moved out of New York. And they found a home for themselves. They were living in apartments and for a time. And like, I got so accustomed to it. We were living in a house prior, but when we moved into the apartments, that felt like almost like a home, but also it felt like we were always there. So when they went and got themselves a house, I was so happy for them. They got nature in their backyard. They have huge trees all around. They're constantly doing like projects. My mom wanted to get a plátano tree. Somehow she was able to sustain that. I personally don't even understand how that makes sense, but it's working. And now I'm just like, you know what, God, I'm gonna try, honestly, with the Holy Spirit's help, to never doubt that you are capable more than anything else. More than any other idol. And there was a verse, I'm gonna just pull it up. It really hit home today when I was reading. It is in Psalms. It's Psalms chapter 84. And it says verse 11. Verse 12 is really like what I wanted to share, but a little bit of context. For the Lord God is a sun, like the sun. Like, how do I express that?
S-U-N?
S-U-N, thank you.
Okay.
And shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those whose walk is blameless. But verse 12 really hits home. Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. You know, sometimes I just need to read that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
take a deep breath, be at peace, walk forward because God's got you. And it's a promise. Like, scriptural promises are there for a reason. It says, Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. So what's the promise here? It says the person who trusts in you, they are blessed. So honestly, once you start veering off that path, like I don't trust him anymore, you're breaking the promise. He'll still look out for you, but it even expresses in the verse beforehand, if you just didn't understand, that it says no good thing does he withhold from those who what? Whose walk is blameless. Bro, if Enoch, nothing was withheld from him. He was able to go to heaven because Enoch was considered one of those who journeyed with God. So like, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an Enoch. I'm just saying that I'm going to stay true to his precepts as best as I can with the Holy Spirit leading me.
Yeah.
And even when I falter, it's okay because I know that Christ, his blood, has already cleansed all my sins.
Yeah.
And so I'm able to get up even through the discouragement and know that I have somebody, I have a brother who is looking out for me, who has already set his title, his banner over me. So anything that I've ever done is wiped away with and my sins are casted away. So like knowing this and the history that I've experienced in my life, I just don't think God would ever let me down. And even when he's silent in the middle of the storm, even if there's frustration or I have something burdensome on my heart, I know that he's still with me.
Yeah. And I guess to kind of like wrap it up is it just takes me to like false expectations. Being a Christian means there's going to be a lot of spiritual warfare. And it means persecution. I think we used that a little too loosely, but like just things that are against us. We're not necessarily facing like physical, like our life is in danger persecution, but we may be getting bullied at work. We may be feeling small in an academic, scenario. We may be feeling like life is just not working in our favor, but like where did that all come from? Expectations, our expectations, not God's expectations, not like, him saying this is what's going to happen. It's us giving him the plan and being like, oh, it's not working, God. Obviously you're not working. Obviously you don't care. There's a lot more to that. But I guess what I want to end off with is also like when you're following God, you will go through a lot of storms, but he's there. And I'm preaching to myself because sometimes I don't feel like he's there, but he's there. He hasn't left. He will never leave. We are the ones who are the adulterers. Like we are the ones who commit adultery by going to idols. He doesn't do that. He doesn't go like, well, John's not,
acting right.
Yeah, I'm going to go to someone else. No, he's still faithful when we are unfaithful. And so we have to remember that we are the unfaithful ones.
Straight up.
And we are trying to restore this relationship back with him that he can only do. His grace is doing that. We just got to like choose what direction. And he's like, all right, I'm going to get them to move. He's, to me, doing most of the work.
He's doing all of the work.
Yeah.
But I get
and we have to make choices.
Yeah, 100%.
So our choice needs to be on a daily basis. I choose him. I do not choose my feelings. I can acknowledge my feelings, but I do not choose them as though it's like permanent, the objective truth. Feelings are just indicators of something's wrong with our belief system. So if I'm feeling scared, maybe there's something in my belief system about God that I need to work on. But it's not that that's actually what's the reality of the situation is. So yeah, I just wanted to end off with that.
That's cool. And I think it says it in the verse. This is the last thing I'll say. It's an us thing. God isn't asking us to go through this journey alone. It's us. It's Christ and us. It's us. So like, if you ever feel like broken up about what it is that you feel like you're facing alone, really try to sit in silence and picture Jesus right there with you. I know that might come off corny, but lately I've been trying it and I'm like, wow, you'll start to notice how much of not a Christian you are. honestly, when you start realizing Jesus was always there with you, and you never thought of it, and it started to like honestly convict, like, yo, I need to do this more often, because he's not telling you to do it alone.
Yeah. Last thing. It also reminds me of the only person who felt God's wrath was Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
We feel darkness. We feel like he's not there, but the one who actually went through that was Jesus.
Preach.
But if we choose God, we're not getting his wrath.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting his grace. But yeah.
All right, sign off, because this is too much for me. I'm gonna tear
All right,
up.
guys. We will see you next time. Bye.
Peace.